Great. Well, thank you very much. This is Jennifer Kirk. I'm the Director of Payments Education for EPCOR, a regional payment association in the Midwest, and I'm going to be going through really what the new ACH rule says. I'm going to be putting into perspective for all of you on the call today really what it is, the intention of the new ACH rule. And then later on in the call, probably after our break, we will turn it over to Raylene, and Raylene's really going to talk more from the implementation side. So she's not going to be talking as much about what the actual rule is, but she's going to be talking about how it is that you can implement that rule either as a financial institution or as a company. So I wanted to provide you with the agenda that we're going to be going through today. And we do have 5 pieces. I'm going to be going through the background. I'm also going to be going through the specifics of the new ACH rule. And I'm also going to be going through some of the considerations just at a very high level that financial institutions and organizations should be thinking about as this new rule is implemented. And then I'm going to be turning it over to Raylene, and she's going to be talking about the impacts, very specific impacts, things that you really need to be taking into consideration as this new rule is implemented. And then she'll also go over some very helpful resources that we have for you as you are implementing this new ACH rule. So as we get started, I'm going to start talking about the background, and I think that it's important that we talk about some of the definitions that we are going to be looking at. And these definitions are going to be defined in the 2013 ACH rules. Now, if you have your 2000 ACH rule book, or if you're following along, one of the things about this new data security framework rule is NACHA, the National ACH Association, they publish a new rule book every single year. This year, 2013 version happens to be a nice, lovely color purple. And within the new rule, or within the rules every year, within the OR operating rules section of the rule book, there is typically, they have included all of the new rules in that section. So that's why they publish the new rule book every year, and you should have, several copies over the years if you are collecting them. But in 2013, and actually back to 2012, these new data security framework rules were passed after the rule book basically went to print. So what we need to take into consideration here is that when this happens, when this timing glitch, I should say, happens within the ACH rules, NACHA publishes a supplement. The supplement is printed within the rule book. It's towards the beginning of the rule book. And this specific ACH Security Framework Rules supplement is on page OR Roman numeral XL of your 2013 ACH rulebook. So that's where a lot of this new rule information comes from. And there are 3 newly defined terms within the ACH rules, or 3 terms that we need to make sure that we understand. One is protected information, one is sensitive data, and the third is access controls. And Raylene's going to go into a little bit more of that once we get into the implications and really talking about some of these things. But we need to level set and understand that protected information includes all non-public personal information, including financial information of a natural person. So we are not talking about companies here. We are only talking about consumers or people, natural people, used to create or contained within an entry or any related addenda record within an ACH file or entry. So the protected information here is the non-public personal information. We're going to go through a slide as we get into the presentation that shows you an example of what I'm talking about here. But when you think about non-public information, you think about an ACH transaction. ACH itself has non-public information in it, like my account number is non-public information. And that is going to be something that we need to understand, and that we also need to understand that that information is sensitive data, that within that information there is going to be this protected information, and we need to protect that sensitive data. And then Raylene will get into a little bit more about access controls as we get into the program a little bit later. A couple of clarifications that I want to make sure that we go through is that as we are talking about the program today, we are only talking about non-consumer originators. So as we are talking about protecting protecting this protected information or having a way to secure this protected information, we are only talking about non-consumer, or if we want to say it a different way, corporate originators. We're not talking about P2P transactions when the originator is a person. And we're not talking about CIE transactions in the ACH network, which are customer-initiated entries. And that, again, is usually when a consumer is originating a payment to a company. So, we say P2P for person-to-person. We might say C2B for consumer-to-business. We are not talking about the fact when the originator that is originating this transaction is a non-consumer. We're only talking, I should say, about those that are non-consumer, not the consumer originators. A little bit of background here that I also want to get into is, data security within the ACH network is not something that, or actually data security in general, is not something that is new. Data security has been around in many of your state laws for some time. Data security has been around in the card networks for some time. It's been around in other payment systems for some time. But it's really new in writing, in black and white, in the ACH rules. NACHA started looking at data security a long time ago. The first time they really issued anything about data security is as far back as November of 1986. And you can see on the screen there, there is what we call a NACHA Board of Directors policy statement. And NACHA issues these Board of Director policy statements typically as a reaction to something that's happening in the industry. So probably in 1986, and I don't know what the exact thing that happened or might have been in the media, but NACHA's Board of Directors at that time looked at data security and said, wow, we really need to pay attention to this. And they looked at it and said, is there a business case to write a new rule, an actual new rule that goes into the ACH rules? And at that time, the answer was not necessarily. So there are times when new rules are not implemented, they're not balloted in the NACHA world, but the NACHA Board of Directors decides that they need to issue what they call a policy statement that basically identifies to the ACH world that something needs to be, we need to pay close attention to something. And so the first time anything was issued on data security, again, was in 1986. That luckily was revised in 2010, and now in 2013 they have decided, no, the policy statement is not necessarily good enough. We do need to implement some rules around this. So these Board of Director policy statements have been included in your ACH rule book as part of, the introductory chapter of the ACH rules, but this will be the first time they have put it in a ballot form. The ballot has passed, and they will become new rules according to the ACH rules. Another thing that the NACHA Board of Directors addressed in 2007, which, again, this is still valid, is talking about data breach notifications. And really, in 2007, we had seen in the media prior to that, and we still continue to see in the media, several data breach situations. I'm not going to call out any names. You guys know when you hear information was stolen, probably certain companies' names may come to mind. And because of this media attention and because of the frequency that these data breaches were happening at the corporate and financial institution level, mainly at the corporate level, the NACHA Board of Directors in 2007 issued a Board of Director policy statement that says if your banking, if ACH information is breached, if it is stolen somehow, they would like, there's no requirement, it's not a rule, but they would like you to report that to NACHA, and they go through in the policy statement how that is addressed. And, that's for